Breaking news this hour about Israel, Iran, and the President of the United States. As the New York Times is now reporting, Israel had plans to strike Iran's nuclear sites as soon as next month. But President Trump put the kibosh on that in favor of negotiating with Iran, something that we've seen him talk about in recent days, including inside the Oval Office just on Monday. One of the reporters who broke that story, the New York Times' Maggie Haberman, is here with me tonight. What is your reporting show about just how close Israel was to moving ahead with this?
Sure. So there's a team of us who reported on this story, and Israel wanted to move ahead with these strikes, but really couldn't do it without U.S. support. And that was widely known within the Trump administration. And President Trump, yes, he has been very bellicose about Iran, but he has also been very clear that he doesn't want Iran to get a nuclear weapon, but he also would like a deal with Iran. It is something that he has talked about for a while, and he, waved Israel off of this essentially in terms of the U.S. supporting these strikes because he wants to try a diplomatic route. And the feeling among some of his advisors is, if we do this, there's nothing lost if we try these talks. If they don't work, the option of a military strike is always there. These strikes on Houthi targets were sort of seen as a midway point for some of the administration. It has underscored, and it's a debate with nuance, but that there is some divide within the administration on how to handle Iran generally.
Yeah, and the president seems very wary from your reporting and also what he's said publicly about this of taking a step like that and not being able to pull it back. And you report about warnings that he's gotten from some officials like Tulsi Gabbard over, it could go not the way they expect it to go, essentially.
Correct. There are a number of officials in the administration, and these are conversations that have been ongoing in various settings among themselves, not all necessarily in a group in front of the president. But there is a broader than not broad consensus emerging that there is no reason to get involved in something that might not be able to be contained as sort of a surgical strike on Iran, even if it's on all of the nuclear facilities, that this could develop into a broader war, which President Trump has made very clear privately and publicly. He does not want to end up committing the U.S. to another drawn-out conflict.
Yeah, and this meeting happened on Monday in the Situation Room. That was also the day that we heard from the president as he was meeting with the president of El Salvador, making clear they do not intend to return Kilmar Abrego Garcia to the United States, despite what the Supreme Court has said about facilitating it. What is your sense of what's happening behind the White House, behind the scenes in the White House, and how they're viewing both Judge Boasberg today threatening contempt, and the judge yesterday saying, I'm going to have 2 weeks of intense discovery and find out if you guys are just blatantly ignoring this order?
Well, they're ready to see what the judges do, and they are going to come to court, and I think they are going to take the same minimalist approach that we have seen. And I think the general feeling, and we'll see how this plays out, Caitlin, but the general feeling in the administration is they have better odds than not with the Supreme Court, because the Supreme Court generally is not going to want to dictate. The conservative justices are not going to want to try to look like they are dictating how the U.S. handles some aspect of immigration enforcement or foreign policy. And so the bet is that this ruling, the main one by Justice Roberts, which was sort of a split, right? It was a way to give everybody something where they could say they won. And hold things together. I don't know how long that's going to hold. They're clearly going to end up back at the court eventually. But this administration wants this fight. You saw that today. You have seen that every day that they talk about immigration. They think that the court of public opinion is generally on their side, and they would certainly rather be talking about this than talking about tariffs or talking about economic confidence decreasing. So.
Yeah. It also says a lot that they fired the attorney at the Justice Department who
yes, it does.
Was honest in court and said it was a mistake, which the Solicitor General also later said to the Supreme Court. But on this overall, you've been doing a lot of reporting on the deals that they've been cutting with law firms to get hundreds of millions of dollars in pro bono legal work, which the president was talking about this week in terms of what this would look like, that they could be working on things like tariffs and negotiating deals. Do these legal firms, do they get themselves into a situation where they were not expecting what now the president expects them to do?
Yeah, they seem to think, these law firms, that they were going to be doing things, and they're not all the same, and they're not all. They didn't all get caught up in his crosshairs for the
Yeah.
same reasons. In some cases, there were EEOC issues with them. In other cases, it was who they employed. In the case of Cadwalader, nobody could quite figure out what that was about. That was a firm that had employed Todd Blanche, now the Deputy Attorney General, and he left because they didn't want to take Trump on as a client. And they had real reasons for not wanting Trump, who was notorious for wanting to not follow the advice he was given by lawyers or for not paying his bills. But regardless, these firms generally believed they could just get themselves out of his sights if they did this. And in fact, he clearly is so happy with the success he has had getting them all to bend the knee that he is just going to keep pressing and sees this as some kind of, at least in perpetuity for the duration of his term. And it's not really clear when exactly he thinks the terms of these deals end. It's not clear what would trigger noncompliance. It's not clear what the penalty would be if they didn't comply. So there's a lot of questions.
So they said yes, and then thought maybe he would just forget that they promised $50 million in pro bono work, for example. And then when he comes up and says, actually, I want you to do more and more, I mean, this could actually still hurt them in the end.
It could absolutely hurt them in the end. It could make other clients leave. It could make associates leave. It could make partners leave. And in some cases, we've already seen that. So these were bets they made, and we'll see how they play out. But the firms are now in turmoil, and Trump is smiling.
Maggie Haberman, great reporting as always.
Thanks, Caitlin.
Thank you so much.
Quickly, I want to ask you about some breaking news. The New York Times just reported this, and I want to quote it here. Israel had planned to strike Iranian nuclear sites as soon as next month, but was waved off by President Trump in recent weeks in favor of negotiating a deal with Tehran to limit its nuclear program, according to administration officials and others briefed on the discussions. Also in the article, a National Security Council spokesperson told the Times, quote, President Trump has been clear Iran cannot have nuclear weapons and all options remain on the table. Now, I know you, as a ranking member of the Intelligence Committee, there are some things you can't tell me, but what is your reaction to this reporting?
Yeah, I'm not one bit surprised by it, John. The Israelis, and in this prime minister in particular, Prime Minister Netanyahu, has floated this before with other presidents. Other presidents have stepped in and said, not a good idea. I have no doubt in my mind, and I spent about an hour and a half with the prime minister a month ago or so. I have very little doubt in my mind, but this prime minister has decided that he's going to attack Iran. He looks at Iran and sees a degraded air defenses. He sees a weakened country, and he sees his own legacy is wrapped up in this. His challenge, of course, is getting Donald Trump to sign up to assisting. And there's two big things that I think push back against that. One, I don't have a lot of good things to say about Donald Trump, but I do think he has a natural aversion to wars, and in particular wars in the Middle East. And oh, by the way, we've been talking about how disastrous the economy is and is likely to get. If you layer in a massive spike in global oil prices on top of these tariffs, on top of the market decline, I mean, I don't even know if the word recession is a big enough or an all-encompassing enough word to describe what would happen to the American economy if there was a shooting war in the Middle East right now.
Congressman Heim, do appreciate your time tonight on many subjects. Thank you very much.